This is CX of M Radio, the voice of customer experience professionals.
Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Slayton, and I'm so glad you're here. I empower leaders to turn indifferent customers into loyal fans. I talk to guests with a wide range of expertise who share meaningful insights and wisdom. We give you practical tips and proven frameworks and share ways to help you delight your customers. I've been doing some research on what's most important to business leaders, and I've heard three major themes. Number one, their employees are burned out and feel overwhelmed. Number two, they're concerned about customer retention. And number three, they want to address customer friction, whether it's controllable or not, but they need actionable results. As a result, I've created the 120-day Quick Start, a 4-step program designed to go from current state assessment to specific strategies to get you actionable results in 120 days. If you want to make a quick impact, check out empoweredcx.com for more information. I'd love to talk to you.
That discretionary effort is what happens when people go above and beyond and they feel good about going above and beyond, and customers feel that too. When someone isn't just playing by the rule book, and employees, do that, they bend over backwards, or they do a little bit extra, or they think about something extra. Again, it's not always frontline employees. Sometimes it's things that are designed and planned out way behind the scenes that are then delivered to the customers. But I think it is that intrinsic motivation that unlocks that extra bit of, let me do something above and beyond.
Well, I am so excited to have my guest, Greg Kihlstrom, on the show today. He is from GK5A, and Greg and I met a long time ago. Seems like another lifetime ago. He ran basically as a marketing agency and helped me with the development back when I was doing consulting the first time 15 years ago. My business was called True Colors Consulting, and Greg helped with all the marketing, the branding, the website, all that strategy around that. He was fantastic. And then come to find out all these years later, our roads ended up crossing again as he and I both got into the customer experience world. I guess, I know for me, it was a decade ago. And he has done all this amazing thing, and he blends his marketing expertise and background with his customer expertise background that he has developed. He's written a number of books and just a really smart guy. So we're going to have a fun conversation today and hopefully give you some insight about how you can turn indifferent customers into loyal fans and delight your customers. So welcome to the show, Greg.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah. And so Greg, also a podcaster, his podcast is called The Agile Brand. And I'm excited that he has invited me at some point here in the future to be a guest on his show. But Greg, if you don't mind, you have such an amazing background. Share with the audience how you came from where you were to get into the world of customer experience.
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to keep it relatively brief, but so I started a marketing agency, Mark, as you mentioned, called Carousel 30. I started in early 2000s, and we did a lot in the digital realm, so web design, social media. Really starting in 2003, we saw the rise of a lot of interesting things like social media as a marketing tool and personalization and programmatic advertising, things like that. So I ran that company for about 14 years. And I would say towards the end of that time frame, I started having a few frustrations. I mean, first, it was a great experience having the company. I ended up selling it at the end of the 14 years. But I started getting a little frustrated in the process of, clients would hire my company, and I thought we did a great job with branding and advertising and marketing, but there were a lot of things that we couldn't control. And a lot of those things turned into what I started realizing more and more were customer experience, product experience, and even employee experience. And so, we could create a great brand and a great marketing campaign, but if the experience that the customers had with the product or service was not great, then the campaign ultimately wouldn't be as successful as it could be. And so, that led me to kind of dive deeper into, okay, well, what if I had more of a say, or what if I had a little more control over that, or at least where it was working with the people that had more control over that experience. And so that led me to, diving deeper into customer experience. And then the more I got involved in customer experience, I started realizing, well, okay, if there's unhappy employees that are creating the products, delivering the products, and frontline employees interacting with the customers, they're not going to have a good customer experience. And so that kind of led me even deeper into employee experience. And so after selling the agency, I really dove into those aspects for a while. And then as of late, I've been actually doing a little bit more back in the marketing world, but informed by all of that experience and all of those different aspects. And I think it gives a lot of empathy and a lot of insight into why there sometimes isn't a great customer experience. And yeah, that kind of leads me to today.
Well, that's great. And I know you're serving on an advisory board at the University of Richmond. They have a CX group, and also did some things with Virginia Tech as well, right?
Yeah. I served on the marketing advisory board at Virginia Tech and the CX advisory board at University of Richmond, and done a bit with CXPA as well. Helped with the Book of Knowledge effort as well.
And so for those people who may be watching, I'll hold this out. If you're interested, there's the first 6 or 7 or 8 books within this book have come out, and this is the Book of Knowledge. So all the different topics related to CX, and Greg was one of the people involved in writing the book. I was one of the reviewers, but you guys did all the heavy lifting.
There was a lot of people involved in that project. My piece was like that small, but still really some really great people involved in it. And I mean, I learned just from being surrounded by the people writing and talking and discussing this stuff. So that was a great experience in and of itself.
All right. Well, all really interesting stuff. So let's dive into that a little bit, starting with the last book, The Center of Experience.
Yeah.
And so this is sort of blending together the customer experience and the employee experience, and how they work together, and maybe how to operationalize the CX with your team members. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah,
kind of the highlights.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I think we've all experienced this, and I think of late, whether it was the pandemic with staffing shortages or just we've all been that customer that was like, man, I love this company, I love this brand, but what in the world is going on with the onboarding, the training, all of that? It's not even that, the employees are not well intentioned. It's when the employees aren't treated well, the customers feel it. And so I tried to tackle that from both angles of, okay, if we were to start at the center of the wheel, so to speak, is let's make sure that we have a great culture and treat our employees well and train them well and all of that. And then those employees will then be motivated, because I think employee motivation is so key here. And again, we feel it when they're not motivated. We've seen it, they're on their cell phones when they should be working, or they're whatever the case may be. They're just, even the employees that are not on the front lines, think about a product, like even a web-based product that you've used. how many times have you used something and you're like, man, they don't get me? Like if they only actually understood what I as the customer needed, this product would be so much better. And, those are not frontline employees. Those are people sitting behind a computer writing code. Everybody needs to be aligned with the customer. And so, I took that premise of kind of making a wheel, employees at the center, serving customers in a variety of different ways, everything from the brand and, what we would know traditionally as the branding and marketing side to, measuring the platforms that are used and the governance of all of these things and several different aspects that kind of build up this center of experience, really based on a center of excellence model.
Well, really interesting. And I know the framework that CXPA uses involves culture and accountability as one of the 5, what I would call CX competencies. And it sounds like, when you talk about steering committees and governance teams, that goes into managing a portfolio of projects and how to prioritize and execute on those. So that's one thing I'd love to dig into a little bit more. And then also you talked about, really treating the employees well. Say more about what that means to get motivated, as you say, motivated employees. Like what's involved in that?
Yeah, and I think I think a lot of companies get it right, but so many more don't. And so I think one of the key concepts is intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And so we all know extrinsic motivators as, okay, you get a salary bump, you get you get either financial rewards or something, something like it. And what has been well documented and research is that, yes, up to a certain point, that's great. Everybody needs a certain amount of money to not only live, but live comfortably. And yes, it's always nice to get a bonus, but after a certain point, it ceases to motivate further. And so intrinsic motivation on the other side, these are things that it doesn't really cost dollars out of the company's pockets, but providing more educational opportunities, more opportunities to help from an altruistic perspective. That could be either, a volunteer effort, like a CSR type effort, ESG effort, whatever that might be, or it also could even be mentoring other employees, or, there's a lot of different things that intrinsically motivate someone. I mean, for me, I'm motivated when I can do something that I've never done before and that maybe not that many people have done before. So, innovation and learning kind of together, that's such a motivator to me. And it means so much more than, a small bump in pay or something like that. And so understanding that intrinsic motivation is such not only does it help, but it sustains, and it keeps people motivated longer than, okay, I'm going to get my annual bonus, so I'm going to stick around for another 3 months. So that really at the key, at the heart of things is what helps motivate those employees. And then the important part is it unlocks discretionary effort. So it's not just, I'm going to do my job so I don't get fired. I think the whole quiet quitting and all that stuff, some of that is just people were probably working too hard to begin with, and now they're just working the normal amount that people should probably work for a salary. But that discretionary effort is what happens when people go above and beyond, and they feel good about going above and beyond. And customers feel that too, when someone isn't just playing by the rule book, and employees, do that, they bend over backwards, or they do a little bit extra, or they think about something extra. Again, it's not always frontline employees. Sometimes it's things that are designed and planned out way behind the scenes that are then delivered to the customers. But I think it is that intrinsic motivation that unlocks that extra bit of, let me do something above and beyond.
Yeah. So a lot of times in my podcast, I like to pull out gems and just repeat them for people listening. And that whole idea of intrinsically motivating employees for discretionary effort, right? Just so important. And I know as an illustration, to piggyback on your point, at the bank I worked at, we had a group called the Experienced Champions group, and they ran for, roughly a year. I think the last one was 8 months. And so they graduated and but they got the executives joining them, seeing their final presentations, connecting their work with something that leadership cared about.
Yeah.
They got involved in, for example, we did an employee survey, and there were top priorities that came out of that. So they might have done more, for example, more discovery on some of the data we got back from that, or even tried to recommend a solution to a particular problem. Let's say it was around communication. And they got together as a team, worked collaboratively. A lot of them didn't work with each other ever. A lot of them, as you described, we don't like to use the word back office, in a supportive role, in a functional role. But they got to, and I think one of the things that you're able to do there, and I'd love to get your thoughts, or one of the ways to get intrinsic value and discretionary effort as a result, is to connect the dots for people to see how their role adds meaning to the organizational goals, and not just the outcomes of those goals, like revenue, profit, but the things that get done, right, that lead to those other goals, right? Tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I often say, every employee should have some kind of line of sight to the customer. And so, exactly what you just said is, if we can tie them to some kind of, yes, revenue outcomes and all that, that also helps. That helps when we're talking about, raises and promotions and all that stuff too. But I agree. I think if we can tie it to some kind of customer experience that they are directly related to, honestly, if you try a little bit, it's really hard not to find a direct line, somehow. And sometimes, maybe it takes a little creativity, but at least at the team level, if not at the very individual and task level, you should be able to do that. And when organizations have been able to do that, and the results are phenomenal, because again, everyone has that additional purpose in their job of, besides just showing up so they don't get fired.
Yeah. And Greg, when you think about, I'm so glad you brought that point up about everybody should have a line of sight to the end customer, but that everybody does have a role in that link, in that chain that leads to what we deliver to the customer in the end. And I was thinking about, like, if you work for an insurance company, and you say, well, I work in the support role, I do underwriting, or let's just say you're in legal, or you're in regulatory, and you're involved in writing up some of the agreements or some of the documentation that a customer would need to sign. So they're getting some of these documents at a moment where they've had to file a claim. So if they've had to file a claim, something probably bad has happened, right? It's not a good thing that has happened. Right. And it's an emotional thing, and it's a really tough thing. And so they get this document where already they're under a lot of stress and pressure and anxiety, and they get this document they can't even make sense of, right? So wouldn't that be an example of how everybody can make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great example. I think, the finance, department, like what happens if your credit card payment doesn't go through on an invoice, all of those. But the insurance example, that is a great time where, there are regulations in place, or, in this case, there's a contract that has to be signed, and they're not going to change the language to make someone feel better. But the way they do it, there's so much latitude in the way that it could be presented, as opposed to basically just here, sign this and good luck with it, and that's where, there is still so much room to move there. And, that's where someone thinking a little bit above and beyond and saying, okay, what you were just saying is, okay, this is a rough time. This is a document. I can't change the language in this document, but what can I do to actually, empathize with the customer a little bit right now? It's either it's surprising or not how few times that's changed. It's sort of like, oh, well, my job is to get a signature. that's that other team down the hall. That's their job to make the customer feel good, right? And that's a bad excuse.
I remember a conversation I had once with someone in an organization, and they said, well, we work in legal and our job is to protect the company.
Right.
And while that is 100% true, that is true. Well, the illustration we just gave in terms of, at some point, somebody's going to be a customer who gets some of these documents. Could we make it customer friendly? Do we have that option? And to your point, either in the delivery or the communication of that document, if we can't alter it. So I think that's fascinating. I'm so glad you laid out a framework in your book, and you're thinking about that. There is a direct correlation. I used to say inextricably linked, the employee experience and the customer experience. And in the way, and I love the way you broke it down between intrinsic and extrinsic, and the way I think about that in terms of, if you're a leader, and again, I'd like to get your opinion, but if you're a leader, the extrinsic are now just table stakes. Like you have to get that salary grading and the levels right. You have to get the bonuses right. You have to get the benefits right. You have to get the PTO and the vacation. Those you just have to kind of get right for the job. But what's really going to change from I'm an employee here, I'm happy, to I can't wait to go to work, I'm going to give you that discretionary effort, is the intrinsic motivators. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the extrinsic stuff is, it's what keeps them from maybe looking on a job posting site for another job, right? It's the bare minimum, and but it's the intrinsic stuff. And I mean, again, the good news is, it takes a little bit of effort, but it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of time. There are programs that you can put in place that help with a lot of this stuff. And everyone is a little bit different. I mean, not everyone's motivated by the same things that I'm motivated by, but there are a lot of things that many employees share. And so therefore, programs like learning is a very common one that is shared among a lot of people. It's not, some people may not, but so having opportunities to learn more on the job and do things like that, that's an easy way that also benefits the employer, because wouldn't it be great to have employees that are learning more and motivated to learn more, and also motivated to do better work and provide better customer experience? So, it's sort of it's a virtuous cycle if you do it well. And I think as a leader and as someone who's managed plenty of people as well, I mean, taking the time to understand what motivates someone, I think, is also just being a good manager, and then understanding the similarities and the differences, where maybe one person is really motivated by recognition, and so there's all these like employee recognition programs, and that's really, really great for some people. I like to collect titles and things like that, so maybe I'm one of those people too. But there's plenty of people that they don't want the spotlight, and they just don't want that. They want something else. They want, leave me alone, give me autonomy, and let me learn and grow and all that stuff in my own way. And so, as a manager, thinking along those lines kind of forces you to be a better manager and a more empathetic manager, and provide a little bit for the diversity in the team. Not everybody wants the same things.
Well said. Really, really important to personalize it for each person and find out what you can tap into that motivates them. Excellent conversation. So that was the book before this most recent book. And then the most recent book is Meaningful Measurement of Experience, right?
Yeah, of the customer experience.
Of customer experience. So you describe why you wrote it in up at the top. So if I am a leader, again, of an organization, I'll just throw this out. If you're a wealth management, you are a owner or general manager of a financial advisory organization, you own an insurance company, you're a leader at a bank, for example, what are the kinds of things that qualify as meaningful measurement?
Yeah. So I actually, I have 4 qualifiers here, and I'm going to refer to my screen here because I know I wrote the book, but I want to get this right. So there's 4 kind of qualifiers of what I call a meaningful measure. And so first is that it's consequential, and so it's not, it has a direct impact on the business. I think as much as we want to talk about CX and EX and all of this stuff, if we can't tie it back to business value and returns, it's not going to get the investment and the attention of leadership. So, consequential is the first one. Understandable is the second one. And that just means, okay, if I say I came up with this fancy score and it's compiled from a million different things, and you should really pay attention to it and think it's important. If I can't explain that metric in a very short amount of words, it's just not gonna be as impactful and as meaningful. So we have to be able to understand the calculations that we're making and that we're putting out there as important. Actionable, just what can I do with it directly? If I, again, to use that example of the metric or the composite score or whatever we want to call it, that's hard to understand. That same metric might be hard to, okay, well, what happens when that score goes down? What do I actually do about it? It's actually a complaint I have about things like Net Promoter Score and CSAT sometimes is I think there's plenty of value in those, but I have plenty of critique about them too, because when NPS goes down, okay, well, what do I do next month or next quarter exactly to fix that? Because it's this big score that's compiled based on this, however long customer experience. So actionable is very important. And then the last one is repeatable, and that is one where NPS and others I think are great, is, can I keep running this to get a relative measure over time? Because I think that's really the power of some of those scores like CSAT and NPS is we do it every month, every quarter, every year, or whatever, and we can actually see those scores dip and rise and stuff like that, and then we know that something's going on. I think where it gets challenging is, again, diagnosing, okay, well, what happened to cause that dip or that rise, and how do we either do more or less of that?
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to ask a follow-up question, but first I want to take a moment to translate for some of our people who may not come from a CX background. So CSAT, customer satisfaction score, usually some scale. You understand what that means. And then Net Promoter Score, NPS, Net Promoter Score, is the difference between those people who give you a very high score versus those people who give you a lower score, promoters versus detractors. And then the net of that score in aggregate is the Net Promoter Score. And it's been tied to customer loyalty. But as Greg mentioned, it's a metric, not a measurement. And that means it's a little harder to action on just by looking at the score. So that creates a problem in that particular one of Greg's 4 categories. So having said that, those are, as you described, those are lagging indicators. In other words, after a customer would give you a grade or a score at some point after they've had the experience. And then what you're talking about is, well, maybe there's some things that are either real time, which like is just now happening, or has already happened, like a lagging indicator. So tell us about maybe a couple of those measurements that might be something people should think about using.
Yeah. I mean, so I think there's a lot of there's several different ways to kind of slice and dice metrics. So we can look at it in terms of there's quantitative measures that everything from real-time, website metrics. If you're in an e-commerce checkout and, we're seeing funnel drop off and things like that, we can start to determine things. There's certainly qualitative, that whether that's sentiment analysis, comments made, and, it's kind of the free text part of the Net Promoter Score surveys that we all get after we buy something or anything like that. Another category that I talk about in the book is more holistic measures. So measuring the journey itself. And so I think that's where there's a lot of promise and to get a better understanding of. So I guess to talk about some of the challenges, and you touched on this already, of the idea of the lagging indicator. We ask a question about, what was your experience like, or, another one is customer effort score, like how easy was it to use the product or check out or whatever the task was. But we ask that after the fact. And so, I know I have a short memory. If I get what I want, I'm generally happy and I'm not going to complain too much. If I had a problem right towards the end, it's going to stick with me and I might say something or react negatively. Not everyone's like me, of course, but as a lagging indicator, we only get the information that someone chooses to share with us and what they remember and what they find important. If we are measuring all along the way and, capturing information in real time, near real time, or even, just as they go and we look at the metrics afterwards, we're able to see things that maybe even a customer didn't notice, but, oh, wow. Again, I'm just going to keep using the checkout, the checkout process as an example here. Wow, that page took 10 times longer to load than normal. They didn't say anything about being dissatisfied, but they didn't buy as much as the normal customer does. So maybe they were just frustrated and wanted to just get out of there and not worry about this process anymore. Or, so we're able to see things and tie things together. Or maybe the Net Promoter Score or customer satisfaction dipped a little bit and we look back and our platform was really slow, or there were a lot of like timeouts on the product or something like that. And so mixing these different metrics together also gives us a better insight. And I think that's where it goes back to being able to diagnose and actually figure out what's going on and not just saying, okay, well, things, the needle moved in one direction or another, either, we can celebrate or cry in our peers or whatever, but like, we don't actually know why until we actually look and dig through the quantitative and some of those other types of metrics. And then I guess one last thing is just, I think there's another whole category of metrics that is underserved and not looked at as much, and that's the internal stuff. And so I mentioned some of the product related stuff of like, the IT team or the engineering or technology teams are looking at website uptimes and stuff like that. But I think CX teams could stand to look at some of that from their own lens. But there's also process. How many people does it take to solve a customer's problem? Even if the customer was happy with the solution, if it took like 10 hands to get from, problem to solution, that's not repeatable. That's not sustainable. And that's gonna break, right? And so I think some of the process metrics either should be highlighted a little bit more or should be created in the first place. I think a lot of orgs are not looking at it in that way. They're just happy that things get done. And, that also creates a bad employee experience if they're suffering to kind of serve the customer in the right way. That looking at those process metrics can really help that as well.
Yeah, that's really important. I love that you broke it down by process and product. And I think about and earlier we were talking about the experience metrics, which tend to be thought of as things like Net Promoter or customer satisfaction, these sentiment, how the customers feel about their experience, which tend to be lagging indicators. And then these other process and those are really operational. So you've got the X and the O, experience and operational data coming together to kind of tell a story. And then there's also the data that, that can be harvested, for example, in phone conversations that aren't reported. They're not scored, they're not reported, they're tracked, but they're now with technology, there's a way to collect that data, to transcribe that data, and then have things like AI. In fact, there's a guy named Richard Owen who's going to be coming on the podcast, who was the CEO of Sapmetrics, who is starting in AI. It's OCX Recognition is his company. It's AI, and he's talking about, that specific category of data. What are your thoughts, since you're kind of in this world? What are your thoughts about all that kind of data?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's extremely helpful, and it gives insight into things that, I mean, I think it's all about, how do we get, as long as we have the, privacy and consent and all that stuff to do all that stuff, which, of course we would, but it's all about how do we get answers to questions that customers may not want to share, or, know or think to share. It's in their own best interest that we understand them better and are able to serve them better. But, not everybody wants to fill out a survey. And sometimes people need to buy a product even though they don't like the company that they're buying it from. And so, we get all these kind of misleading metrics sometimes. Sometimes somebody may just score a 10 out of 10 on a survey just to close the window and like move on with their lives. And so, doing things like sentiment analysis and all of that, I mean, that helps us get to, okay, yeah, they've bought from us and they might buy again, but they're not going to go out and tell all their friends about it. They're just trying to get through the day, and they had a challenge and they need to solve it. And buying our product was a way to do that. But they're really frustrated, and we know this because this is the way they talk to us when they have a problem, or when they buy something from us, or when they talk to us at all. And so, yeah, I think it's very valuable to be able to do that. I think it not only helps that customer, but it helps all the customers, and it helps the people delivering the products. I mean, they're doing the best they can, the employees that are building these things and delivering, but they're only, their work is only as good as the data that they really have to go off of.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fascinating conversation. And I know, I don't know how you keep cranking out books, but I know you've got another one coming out now in January. So tell us about that and what the topic is about.
Yeah. It's called House of the Customer. And so this is a little more marketing focused as opposed to customer experience focused, but really a lot of the work that I've been doing, my day job is as a consultant. I work with, Fortune 500s and similar companies to really help implement strategies. So, and I've been working a lot in the marketing technology space, and very much related to customer experience and informed by all that CX work that I've done. But House of the Customer is really about how do we take and build the kinds of infrastructure that helps marketers, it helps CX professionals, it helps even technology teams within organizations, and most importantly, it helps customers have a better experience, a more personalized experience, and a longer lasting experience. And when that happens, when we have greater customer lifetime value, customers win, the brands win, everybody wins.
Yeah, so I love this idea of personalization and the ability to get better and better at that. That I had Alex Genoff from Zappos on, and he uses the term meaningful personalization, and he contrasts that with what sometimes companies are going after big data. And the big data, the illustration he said is like, I bought a barbecue, love my barbecue. Every week I get a promotional item. Do I want to buy a barbecue? Because I guess I fit that big data, filter. But meaningful personalization is truly that. I mean, there's some intelligence and some boy, what a difference that would make if I was a customer, right? You're giving me you're just giving me the things that I'm interested in and not all the other noise, right?
Yeah. I mean, unless you're starting a barbecue store, you probably only need one at a time, right? Right. I think that's where, and then I think even more rudimentary is what I call substitution, which is the, insert first name here or that stuff. And, a lot of people call that personalization. It's really not. I think the best personalization is when we actually think about the customer journey and what that looks like from the customer's perspective. It's not what we want the customer to buy and when. It's what is a customer actually going through and what's the next best action for them in their lives. And so, an easy one there, in the financial services space is like you go through a series of steps, and not everybody has the same journey in their life, but generally speaking, you're going to go through several different stages in your life. And, you're going to buy a car, you're going to buy a house, you may have a family, your kids may go to college, all of this stuff. There is a journey that you're on. And so, to pretend that you're going to buy a car every year or something like that, let's think more holistically about what is that person actually going to, what are the challenges, but also what are the opportunities that we can present them with. And, a lot of work that I'm doing now is in working in customer journey orchestration. And so using AI tools to be able to do that, again, not just from a marketer or a CX perspective where, okay, wouldn't it be nice if they did this and then that? It's more, okay, when presented with a series of options, what is the propensity that someone's actually going to do one thing over the other? And let's show them the thing that is going to be not only most helpful to them, but create that greater lifetime value for that customer, which again benefits everybody.
Very fascinating. Well, you are a busy guy.
I try.
That's a lot. That's a lot of books. I wish I had that kind of energy to write like that. And so thank you so much. This has been an intriguing and insightful conversation. If our audience would be interested in knowing where to find you, I already mentioned before that you're the podcast host of the Agile Brand podcast. Where else might they? And obviously, we talked about several of your books. What's the best way for them to find you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so two things. First, the podcast is available on every Apple, Spotify, all the major channels. So just search for the Agile Brand. So two things. I have a website, gregkihlstrom.com. It's KIHLSTROM. No one ever spells it right. So I think if you spell it in some combination of those letters, you might get it. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, so please connect with me. Let me know you heard me on this show, and I'd be more than happy to chat and talk a little bit more.
That's excellent. So we'll have that contact information, the books, and your LinkedIn profile info on in the show notes.
Great.
What a great conversation, Greg. Thank you so much for being on the Delighted Customers podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. It's always great to talk with you.
Thanks for listening to the Delighted Customers podcast. I'd like to ask you a favor. If you have enjoyed this episode or any of my other ones, hit subscribe or follow. I've got a lot of other great guests that are coming up and a lot of other great content, and I don't want you to miss anything. You can find any links or references on the show in the show notes, and you can find those on my website at empoweredcx.com.
Thanks for joining us for this session of CX of M Radio. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit cxofm.org for more resources.